Let's go to page 233 and let's go over the numbers. So number 1, you have cosine x secant x equal to 1. And this one you want to verify. So whenever you're going to verify the identity, what you need to do is look at which side you want to keep the same and which side you want to simplify. And you want to simplify the side that's more complicated. So, and the first thing you do is look at the function, right? So this one is 1 and this one is function, so this is more complicated. So let's go ahead and simplify this side. And you want to, usually you want to change everything to sine and cosine. So secant is 1 over cosine. And this will cancel out, so you got 1 equal to 1 and put check mark. So 1 is pretty easy. Let's go to 3. You have tangent x, cosine x equal to sine x. Okay, so again, this side is more complicated. So let's go and simplify this side. So let's go and change everything to sine and cosine. So tangent is sine over cosine. And the cosine cancels out, so you got sine equal to sine x. Again, and you make sure you have exactly the same and you put a check mark. Okay, so that's how you verify. And number 5, you have tangent x equal to sine x secant x. So this side is more complicated because these are two things, right? So let's go and change the right side. So you can change everything into sine and cosine. So secant is 1 over cosine. And now you have a sine over cosine. This will give you tangent. And so check. So again, all these are just a couple steps. And number 7, you have cosecant of negative x equal to negative cosecant of x. Cos. Okay, so now the way to check which side is more complicated is look at inside. Okay, look at the inside of the function. Inside of the function, the x is the regular. Anything other than x is more complicated than is regular. So if you look on the inside, again, that's how you compare the functions to see which is more complicated. You look at the inside of the function. So this is x, this is negative x. So this side is more complicated, so you need to change this side. Again, when you change when you're going to simplify, right, you convert into sine and cosine. So cosecant came from sine. So this is 1 over sine of negative x. And from your negative identity, the sine of negative x, if you don't remember, right, this is x. So here's your sine, so it's positive. Whereas your negative angle, here's your negative x, and this is negative. So they're opposite, right? Again, sine is right over here. So if they're opposite, then they will have opposite sign. So this becomes 1 over negative sine of x, okay, because they're opposite. And 1 over sine is cosecant, right? So and you have negative. So that's how you end up with negative cosecant of x. And so check mark. Okay, let's go to 9. Yeah, sine alpha over cosine alpha tangent alpha equal to 1. So obviously this is more complicated, and so let's change this side. So you have sine alpha over cosine alpha, and again change everything to sine and cosine. So tangent is sine over cosine. So cosine and cosine cancels out. So you end up with sine over sine. So again, this is going to cancel out. So you got 1 equal to 1, check. Okay. Number 11, you have cosine beta, secant beta over tangent beta equal to cotangent beta. So this side is more complicated, so let's go and simplify this side. So you have cosine beta. Secant is 1 over cosine, and tangent is sine over cosine. So over here you can see that this will cancel out. Or another option is, notice that this is a complex fraction. Okay? So complex fraction, what you want to do is you want to simplify by multiply by common denominator. So another option is multiply by common denominator, so that this and this will cancel out, and you end up with cosine over sine, so you end up with cotangent. So make sure you know how to simplify complex fraction. To simplify complex fraction, you multiply by common denominator. In this case, it's a cosine beta, right? Okay, let's go to number 13. You have secant theta times sine theta plus cosine theta equal to tangent theta plus 1. Okay, so this side is more complicated because this side has more function. Again, first you check the inside and then you check the outside. So inside they're all same, right? So you check the outside. This has only additional term. This has a whole bunch of stuff. So let's go and simplify this side. And when you simplify this side, I can change this into sine and cosine. So secant is 1 over cosine. And you can use the ditto mark. Okay. So now when you multiply these, you're going to get sine over cosine. Okay. When you multiply by that, you're going to get plus cosine over cosine. And then you can simplify sine over cosine is tangent, and cosine over cosine is 1. And you can write this back in there and put check mark. Okay. Let's go to 15. You have cosine square of t minus sine square of t over sine t cosine t equal to cotangent t minus tangent t. Okay, so this one, if you notice that this is more complicated because you have fraction and you have terms and factors. So you want to change this side. Now, if you notice that this side, okay, this has only one fraction. This has 2 terms. So you have to look at the other side to get some clue. So these are 2 terms. So what you want to do, you want to separate this into 2 terms to match that side. So let's go and separate the 2 terms. So let's undo the common denominator. Okay? So you can separate this into 2 separate terms. Once you separate, then you can go and cancel things out to simplify. So cosine and square cancel out. Okay? This one, the sine and that will cancel out. So cosine over sine will give you cotangent. Sine over cosine will give you tangent. And that's what you get. Okay? And that's it. Okay, let's go to 17. 17, you have cosine beta over cotangent beta plus sine beta over tangent beta equal to sine beta plus cosine beta. Okay. So again, this is more complicated, so let's go and simplify this side. And you want to change everything to sine and cosine. So cosine b over, cotangent is cosine over sine. Now make sure you keep track of your fraction line. This is the major one, so it's longer. Okay, so you got sine b over, tangent is sine over cosine. Okay. So again, you got complex fraction. So to simplify complex fraction, you multiply by common denominator. So multiply this by sine b, sine b. Again, you want to put in parentheses so that way indicate that that's what you multiply. Okay, so this cancels out. And once you cancel out, notice you got sine cosine b on the top, cosine b on the bottom. So this way cancel out. So you end up with sine b. This side you're going to multiply by cosine B and cosine B. Okay. So again, this cancels out. Now once you cancel out, this becomes sine B on the bottom, and this we're able to cancel with that. Okay, so you end up with cosine B. Okay, check mark. Okay, so again, it's very simple. Okay, let's go to number 19. 19, you have a secant square theta minus cotangent square theta equal to 1. Now, you cannot use the identity itself to prove identity. Notice that you have like the cotangent. Notice that sometimes you see this kind of situation. Okay, so this is tangent. Okay, so number 19. Okay, so sometimes when you see this kind of situation, it's very tempting to use this to substitute, but you cannot do it. You can use the identity itself to prove the identity. Okay? So again, what you want to do is convert it into sine and cosine. So secant is 1 over cosine. Tangent is sine over cosine. Okay, so now you have common denominator, so you can subtract. So you got 1 minus sine square theta over cosine square theta. Okay, so again, you can put them together, and 1 minus sine square is cosine square. Right? And cosine square over cosine square is 1. Check. Okay. Okay, let's go to 21. You have sine square x times 1 plus cotangent square x equal to 1. So again, obviously this side is more complicated, right? And when you want to multiply, you can change everything into sine and cosine. So cotangent is cosine over sine. So now you can multiply, so distribute, so sine square times sine square is sine square. This one multiply. Double check sine square x 1 plus cotangent. Okay. So when you distribute, you get that, and then plus distribute, you get cosine. So they cancel out, so you get cosine square x equal to 1. So you got sine square plus cosine square equal to 1. Right? And so that's it. Okay, go to 23. Cosecant alpha plus 1 times cosecant alpha minus 1 equal to cotangent square alpha. Okay, so this one you kind of recognize this is a conjugate. Right? This is a conjugate. So right away you can multiply already before you change. So you're going to get cosecant square alpha minus 1. Okay, again, conjugate, right? Multiply. This will give you cosecant square minus 1, right? Now you can go and change. So cosecant is 1 over sine. Okay, and then when you're going to subtract, right, notice, try to get to that side. This has only one term. These are 2 terms. So to subtract or add fraction, you need to get common denominator. So make this into common denominator. Right? So now you can subtract. So 1 minus sine square will give you cosine square. Again, 1 minus sine square give you cosine square. And cosine square over sine square will give you cotangent square alpha. Okay, and check. Okay, let's go to 25. you have sine t over cosecant t plus cosine t over secant t equal to 1. So again, this side is more complicated, so you have to simplify this side. And to simplify, you change everything to sine and cosine. And keep track of your major fraction line. Cosecant is 1 over sine. Secant is 1 over cosine. Okay, again, now you have complex fraction. To simplify complex fraction, you can go and multiply by common denominator. So this will cancel out. You end up with sine squared t. This one over here, you can multiply by common denominator, so that's your cosine t. Cosine t. So this will cancel out, and you end up with cosine squared t. And sine squared plus cosine squared equal to 1. So check.